Welcome to the deep dive. If you're here, you're probably navigating the incredibly complex and, let's be honest, often overwhelming world of reproductive health.
Especially the high-stakes journey of IVF.
Exactly. And today we're zeroing in on one of the most common, but also one of the most debated therapies that people use alongside IVF, acupuncture.
It's a field where the emotional load is just immense, and every little bit of information, every potential edge really matters.
It really does. So our mission today is to cut through some of the noise, go past the testimonials and the big claims. We've been digging into the research you sent over, the physiological studies, the clinical reviews, to get to the core of it.
The how.
The how, exactly. We want to find the measurable biological mechanisms.
Yeah.
How does acupuncture actually influence the body to support AVF?
And before we even get into that, I think we have to ground this whole conversation in why this matters so much.
Good.
The biggest challenge in IVF, the absolute linchpin, is egg quality.
So give us the numbers. What are the stakes we're talking about here?
The statistics are, well, they're pretty stark, particularly as you get older. To produce just one chromosomally normal embryo, haploid embryo,
Which is the baseline, right? The absolute minimum for a chance at implantation.
it's the non-negotiable prerequisite. And the number of eggs needed to get that one good embryo just escalates dramatically. If you're under 35, you might need, say, around 5 eggs.
5 eggs to get one viable embryo. That's already a pretty high bar.
It is. Now, if you're over 40, that number doesn't just double, it leaps. You might need anywhere from 23 to, well, over 40 eggs to get that same result.
Wow. From 5 to 40.
It just puts this incredible pressure on making sure every single follicle you retrieve is as healthy and mature as it can possibly be.
So you're optimizing the ovarian environment.
You have to. Look, acupuncture obviously can't turn back the clock. It can't change your chronological age. But the core idea that we can pull from all this research is that it seems to work by improving the microenvironment where those eggs are maturing.
So it's about making the conditions better.
It's about optimizing the conditions to maximize the potential of every single follicle you've got.
Okay, let's start unpacking that. Let's
Yeah.
start with what feels like the most basic thing any healthy organ needs. Blood flow. Circulation.
Right. The first big mechanism the research points to is improving ovarian and uterine blood flow. You should think of the ovaries and uterus as these really demanding little factories.
Okay.
They need a constant, high-quality supply chain to bring in oxygen, nutrients, and this is critical, the right hormones for the maturing follicles.
So if the blood flow is bad, it's like a traffic jam starving the factory of its supplies.
That's a perfect analogy, exactly. Poor blood flow means you get less nutrient transfer, you can get localized hypoxia. It just harms that whole delicate maturation process.
And there's actual data on this.
Yes, consistently. Studies in both animals and humans show acupuncture can increase what's called ovarian perfusion. That's the blood flow through the tiniest little blood vessels. But what's maybe more interesting is that it specifically reduces uterine and ovarian vascular resistance.
Vascular resistance. So what does that mean exactly?
It's basically how tight the blood vessels are. High resistance is like having a kink in a garden hose.
Right. Not much gets through.
Not much gets through. So by relaxing those vessels, you improve the whole dynamic. And there are specific human studies that show an almost immediate effect. The research highlights that stimulating certain points, like Sanyin-Jiao or SB6, improves uterine arterial blood flow right away.
That's a concrete, measurable change.
A very concrete vascular effect.
So we've got better plumbing. The physical environment is better. But what happens if the body is just swimming in stress hormones? It feels like better circulation doesn't matter much if the chemical signals are all wrong.
And that leads us right into the second mechanism.
The hormonal side.
This is where that mind-body connection stops being anecdotal and becomes biochemical. Mechanism 2 is all about lowering stress hormones and anxiety markers. IVF is unbelievably stressful. We all know that.
Of course.
But this isn't just about feeling calmer. It's about how that stress chemically disrupts your reproductive system.
So what's the pathway? How does stress cause that disruption?
It's all about the HPA axis, the hypothalamic pituitary adrenal axis, and the stress hormone it releases, cortisol.
Right.
High sustained levels of cortisol are just destructive. They essentially hijack the system. They directly interfere with that delicate dance of LH and FSH, the main reproductive hormones. When cortisol is high, the body basically prioritizes survival over reproduction.
So it's actively blocking the very signals we want the ovaries to get.
It's blocking the signals, and the research really shows this clearly. You can look at studies like one from 2009 that followed IVF patients. They found women who got acupuncture during their IVF cycle had, significant drops in key stress markers.
Like cortisol.
Like serum cortisol and also prolactin.
Oh, prolactin is interesting
Mm-hmm.
because that's the lactation hormone, and we know high levels can shut down ovulation.
Yes, so seeing a measured drop in both cortisol and prolactin suggests the body is shifting out of that emergency fight or flight state. It means your system is just better able to receive and use the stimulation meds you're taking.
The reduction in anxiety is a bonus.
A great bonus, but the drop in cortisol and prolactin, that's a real chemical advantage.
Okay, that's a powerful 1-2 punch. You have a better delivery system from good circulation and a cleaner chemical signal from less stress. Now let's go deeper. This is where you said it gets really interesting, down to the cellular level.
Right, to inflammation.
Inflammation. Mechanism 3.
I like to call inflammation the silent killer of egg quality. So this third mechanism is all about modulating inflammation and specific immune factors. That microenvironment inside the follicle, it has to be pristine. If it's flooded with pro-inflammatory signals, the quality of that egg just plummets.
And what kind of damage does that actually do to the cell?
You're talking about things like oxidative stress. It's like premature aging for the egg. The sources specifically point to these inflammatory molecules like TNF-alpha.
Tumor necrosis factor alpha.
That's the one. And another one called interleukin-6 or IL-6. Now, these are important for your immune system, but when they're too high in the reproductive tract, they disrupt everything. They damage the mitochondria in the oocyte. They mess with meiosis. They basically create a hostile, aging environment.
So the acupuncture is kind of like an anti-inflammatory filter. It's protecting the eggs as they mature.
That's a great way to think about it. The data suggests it can literally lower the levels of those specific mediators. And by shifting that whole environment toward a less inflammatory state, you're providing a healthier, safer space for that egg to complete its development. You're protecting its machinery.
This all seems to connect. Better blood flow, less stress hormones, a less inflammatory environment. It touches every single part of the process,
It does.
which has to have some very specific clinical applications.
Yeah.
And that brings us to the fourth point, helping poor responders.
Precisely. If you're fixing all those foundational issues, you'd expect to see the biggest difference in the people who are struggling the most.
And poor responders, just to define that, are women with diminished ovarian reserve, right?
Exactly. DOR. They often produce a low number of eggs, and the quality can be lower even when they're on the highest doses of stimulation meds.
They need every possible advantage just to get their ovaries to respond at all.
Every single one. And the evidence from clinical reviews and some pilot trials suggests that, yes, acupuncture may help this group respond better. The theory isn't that it's one single magic effect, but more like the cumulative benefit of the first three things we just talked about.
So, the better blood supply, lower stress, the reduced inflammation, all that works together to make their existing ovarian function more efficient.
That's the key. It's about maximizing the biological capacity you still have. You're making sure that when those powerful stimulation drugs show up, the ovarian tissue is prepped and ready to receive those signals effectively.
So you get a potentially better yield or better quality from the few eggs they can produce.
That's the hope. That's the theory.
That makes so much sense. It's all about creating the ideal starting conditions. So if we pull it all together, better flow, better hormonal balance, cleaner cellular environment, and better response for tough cases, we have a really solid physiological argument.
We do. The whole approach is focused on optimizing the body's internal resilience.
Here's the big question. We have the how. We have the biological plausibility. Does it actually translate into more pregnancies? What do the big clinical studies say?
And that's where the conversation requires some nuance. This is really important for you, the learner, to grasp. The clinical picture is encouraging, but it's complex. We have several meta-analyses.
So that's where they combine the data from lots of smaller studies.
Exactly. They pool all the data. And some of these, like one published by Shees and colleagues, found that, yes, women who had acupuncture with their IVF did have higher clinical pregnancy rates compared to control groups.
Okay, so that sounds pretty decisive. A win for acupuncture.
Yeah.
Why is there still a debate then?
Because it's all about the quality and the consistency of the studies. This is where critical assessment comes in. While those meta-analyses are positive, we also have to look at things like the Cochrane Review from 2013, which is, kind of the gold standard for this stuff.
And what was their take?
They were more cautious. They found some individual trials that were positive, sure, but their overall conclusion was that the evidence quality was really variable.
What does that mean? Variable.
It means the studies were all a bit different. They used different acupuncture protocols, different timing, different control groups. This makes it really hard to draw one single universal conclusion. So they basically said it's biologically plausible, but we still need more big, high-quality, randomized controlled trials to really nail it down.
Okay, so to sum this up for you listening, the knowledge is almost in two buckets. There's the how and the if,
A good way to put it.
and the how, the physiological mechanisms,
Yeah.
that's strongly supported. We can measure changes in cortisol, in IL-6, in blood flow.
Absolutely. The biological plausibility is very high because we can actually see the mechanisms at work. We see the inflammation go down, the circulation improve.
And then the if, whether it boosts success rates for everyone, is supported by a lot of studies, but it's still waiting for that final universal scientific stamp of approval because doing these trials is just so complex.
Exactly right. And knowing that gives you the insight to move past just, does it work or not, and to understand the sophisticated biological pathways that are being targeted. You understand what the therapy is actually trying to do.
It's about optimizing the body's baseline condition.
That is the number one takeaway. IVF is an incredibly stressful, technically demanding procedure. So anything that can improve the microcirculation, manage the systemic stress response, and shift the cellular environment away from destructive inflammation, it's giving the body the best possible chance to succeed.
Leveraging a complementary method to support a very advanced technology.
Precisely.
And that idea, that influence on the immediate environment, it leads to a final thought for you to take away. If a localized intervention like acupuncture can significantly modulate key things like microcirculation and stress hormones, enough to influence something as complex as successful egg maturation, what other high-stakes biological processes could we improve just by focusing on optimizing their immediate local physiological environment?
Something for you to mull or explore on your own.
Until next time on The Deep Dive.